But I'd like to spend the time this morning exploring some motivations, different motivations that apply specifically, or that have applied specifically to my life. So this message doubles as a bit of an icebreaker for those who know that term. For those of you, which is the majority, who don't know very much about me, this message will serve both to give you an idea of my background, but primarily to show that there's various different stages and various different motivations that I've gone through in my walk towards getting to a better knowledge of God. And I want to look at those various different stages and have a look, do they apply to your life, and maybe sound a slight warning against applying too much focus on any one of those individual stages on their own. I was born and raised in a Seventh-day Adventist family up in Cairns in the far north of Australia. Those who know Australia at all, right up the very top in Queensland is a beautiful little tropical place called Cairns. I was born there. My parents were both heavily involved in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. My dad remains an elder in the Seventh-day Adventist Church up there, and whenever I go back up, I try and catch up with them at least once a year to say hello to them. So I look back and I can only assess that I really did have a good upbringing. I had a stable home, I had a stable family life, mother and father. I had 5 brothers and sisters. There were 6 of us in the crew. I lived in the same house with both my parents from the day I was born up until the day that I moved out voluntarily at age 16. I fled the coop, so to speak. Which is not to say, of course, that I didn't have what I considered issues. As I'm sure every young person in the audience here, or even those who aren't so young, will look back and say, oh, my childhood was full of issues. And though I have no doubt, absolutely, that my parents had all the best intentions, I look back at my religious life, and the fact that I use that phrase is advisedly, about what would seem to me all about what we were not allowed to do. That was really how I grew up, my perception. And the very fact, like I mentioned, that I look back and I'm forced to separate what I saw as my religious life from my normal life, both in inverted commas, shows that all was not as it should have been. Christianity to me was a long list of forbidden activities. That's really what I saw it as a young child growing up, and I would caution any parents here to make sure they avoid that approach with their children. Things we were not allowed or not meant to be doing, especially on the Sabbath day. No football, no cricket, no swimming. It was all about attending services, saying prayers, and monitoring my behaviour. It was all about fighting what seemed normal and trying to do what was apparently right. Now, obviously, there's nothing wrong with that. That is the fundamental that we approach every day of our lives. But I started to ask, what was my motivation for doing that? Why was I facing this challenge every day? For turning up every Saturday to sit as quietly as possible on the hard timber bench, which was all that we had, inventing games as to how we would end the service if we felt the minister was going too long. And, there was 4 of us boys, and we tended to have pretty inventive ways, and we had a few favourites. We had, by the way, the average Seventh-day Adventist message at that time was about 20 minutes, I think. So anything over 20 minutes was just way too long, as far as we were concerned. So we had a few of our favourites that we invented was the trap door, where we could pretend to press a button and the trap door would open and the minister would disappear. We had the fan. There was a fan directly above the minister speaking. We would pretend that we'd push the button at the allotted time and the fan would start to descend. The stage sides would slam shut. But my personal favourite was where we press the button and a little puff of sleeping gas would come out of the microphone and the minister would disappear. Which reminds me, I need to keep an eye on the time. So why was, on a serious note again, why was I trying to endure all this? Why was I, because I genuinely did not enjoy these processes. Now, apart from the obvious fact that at this stage I was less than 12 years old, I can remember that, and I clearly had no choice in the matter. My parents told me I was going to services, so services it was. But it seemed that enduring Sabbath service, in fact enduring life in general, I saw it was all about appeasing this great, fearful God who was intent on catching us out. At any time I should happen to slip up, I can picture the scene. Aha! Messed up again. Aha! Messed that one up as well. So if I look back to my earliest memories, if I go back to the original question, what's my motivation? Why was I here? My stage one, my first motivation was pure and simply fear. That was motivation number one if I look at my life working back. Clearly, fear alone was never going to be enough. It may, in fact it is of course in the Bible touted as one of the beginnings of wisdom, but as an entire way of life, I don't believe so. God wants us to have life, He wants us to have it more abundantly. Not the life that's spent in quivering fear and hiding both from God and from the world. There's not too many people, characters like that in the Bible. We use the term in Australia, wallflowers, people who hide from life in their room. There's not too many wallflowers in the Bible. The men that God talks about who are out there living His way of life. Certainly Jesus Himself, contrary to a popular Protestant hymn about gentle Jesus, meek and mild. Yes, He was that, but the portrayal of Jesus being someone who wouldn't hurt a lamb or say anything against anybody is clearly false. It always seemed a little backwards to me, the verse John 14:15. Feel free to turn there if you like, I will. John 14, verse 15. It's a verse, and we were drummed with these verses as we grew up through our lives. We knew a lot of the Bible. But that verse never quite seemed right to me. If you love me, keep my commandments. It occurred to me very early in my life, shouldn't that read, if you love me, you will want to keep my commandments? And I never saw that in my upbringing. I saw that it was just a you must thing. And that never even sat with me. That never sat right with me even at that young early age. I mentioned I was around 12 when a thought occurred to me that what I viewed as my religious life was purely by obligation. And that it was music that truly motivated and moved me. Surely, I thought to myself, when I looked at the response that music engendered into me, this was the kind of enthusiasm that God was looking for in anyone following Him. And when I did leave home at 16, I immediately abandoned completely any pretense of church attendance and pursued that which had much more of an immediate and obvious emotional effect on me, which was my music. But then, covering a lot in order to fit this into the time frame, not too many years later, there I was back again, attending Seventh-day Adventist Church again. I was in Brisbane now. Brisbane is the capital of the state. It's a 22-hour drive south of Cairns. Australia's a reasonably large place, and I haven't even left the state yet to get to the capital. But I had moved there to pursue a career in music. It's the sole reason I had left. And yet, clearly, God was still calling. The hook and the line was still out there. And He was to continue to do that over and over again over the years, time and again. And I kept coming back. Which brings me again to the question, why? Why did I listen to the call? Why did I keep coming back? And at this stage, I'd moved on from pure fear. And I'd like to suggest motivation number 2. Stage 2 for me now became guilt. Guilt. Now, I've been brought up to know, and I've never doubted, 4 absolute bedrock truths. There is a God. He has a plan. The Bible is what it says it is. And the 10 Commandments are what they say they are. At no stage in my life, and I've spent large swaths of my life with no religious organisation affiliation at all, but those 4 fundamental beliefs have always been there. My parents, to their credit, certainly drove those home from an early day. But I couldn't find the means or the motivation to make what seemed the insurmountable sacrifices that were necessary to dedicate myself to this God and what I understood as His required way of life, even though I understood those 4 fundamentals. And yet, here I was, again again, back at services every week and vainly trying to do what I believed to be right. I was in my early 20s by this stage, and I felt that I truly wanted to save, as the Protestant term is, those around me. I truly did. I started attending what's called the mall, the Queen Street Mall in Brisbane, which over in Europe here we have the town squares. I guess the places where people tend to congregate on a Friday evening. I'd be down there on a Friday night, pounding through the Queen Street Mall, trying to convert people, talking to people, handing them, tracts. You need to read this. You need to get your act together. I used to be out walking the streets of Brisbane with flyers, putting them in letterboxes, usually trying to, again, get people to come along and be converted, come along and start attending. Letterboxing was the phrase we used in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I was singing and playing at retirement homes. And Too was a similar thing. Absolutely nothing wrong with these things, by the way. Well, except maybe trying to convert the town hall to the town square. But I began to be overburdened with what ended up being a completely overpowering amount of guilt. I can remember clearly to this day sitting in a bus. I just finished work. I worked at the Brisbane City Council at that stage. Sitting in a bus waiting to go home and watching literally hundreds of people walk past in the main street of Brisbane and feeling myself a total failure in God's eyes, as I was clearly not converting a single one of these people that walked past me. And surely then, through my failing, they were condemned to a pointless life followed by eternal death. And I reached a point again where I could not reconcile, if this was God's plan, I could not reconcile this with a God whose commandments of life I would even want to keep. The guilt was just too great. So, scratch guilt as a motivation. Scratch fear alone, scratch guilt. And I threw it all away yet again. Yet, the core truths remained and I could not deny them. So I began to look further afield. I've done my time with Pentecostalism, Confucianism, Buddhism, take your pick. And then eventually, through the Plain Truth magazine, I found Worldwide Church of Godism. I want to use that phrase. And still, through it all, why was I looking? The question comes up. What was the motivation now? I was in my mid-20s by now. I moved on from fear, from guilt, from a desperate drive to try and save the world. And motivation number 3 for me, stage number 3 if you like, it became an intellectual exercise. The motivation became knowledge, new truth, if you will. I had stumbled across the ego-gratifying search for supposedly deeper, more exclusive inner knowledge as I saw it. And this was perhaps the most dangerous motivation I had yet taken on. There is a real and ongoing danger in this. I would like to spend a few minutes on this particular. I eagerly fed on what I saw as the concept of being part of this elect, the way that I heard it, the way that I understood it. My understanding obviously misdirected, but it is a trap that is hungrily alluring to all sorts of different levels of human nature. And I speak from personal experience, it's not just been me. I know who's gone through and responded this way. It's a major driver behind the entire world of intelligentsia and academia. This desire for this. The pride of having something that the rest, the commoner, could not possibly have. I was so eager, I thought for sure this was it. This is what I'd always craved. This is what God had wanted me to have. This was wonderful knowledge. Of course it is wonderful knowledge. Let's not mistake that for a second. Fantastic truths that fundamentally changed how I viewed the purpose of my life and the purpose, of course, of God's plan. It was a huge relief from the overwhelming guilt of this being the only day of salvation, as I'd always believed. But was it really the motivation that God is looking for? To bring me along again to services every day, services every week, and to drive my life? A sufficient enough reason to change myself and my way of life. I drank it in for years, but finally, inevitably, if you take this approach, this well of new knowledge, new truth, will begin to dry up, if that's what you're in it for. I had began to adopt the stance, yeah, I've heard that before. My attention began to wander. And once again, the emotion and satisfaction of music took over. The thirst for never-ending newness is a powerful temptation, and music's just one thing, perhaps for me, the most powerful thing, that allows this endless variety to keep on coming. It's a powerful distraction that feeds the human desire for constant variety and quickly took over when the well of, as I saw it, new spiritual knowledge began to fail me. Now, music, as I said, is not the only one. You can add to this, and I speak again, maybe primarily to the younger generation, but certainly not only to the younger generation. New clothes, new gadgets, new books. The world adds new sex, new partners. In the last couple of years, you can add new genders. The latest cloak and dagger conspiracy theory on the internet. How many people have I seen that? Lead that astray. Sport. Every game is a new result. Every year, your team changes. There's this constant newness. Travel. A constant flow of new places, new experiences. We need to be very, very cautious of seeing, is that our primary motivation for coming along, because we want to get this new truth. We want to be hearing something new every week. We want to be different from the others because we feel we've got something that the others don't have. That was possibly my most dangerous motivation, my most dangerous stage. But I would like to go on during that period and cover two more motivations that I heard during those periods, going back quite a way now. Truths that are truths, but that I heard, perhaps, well not perhaps, I definitely misinterpreted, but I also know truths that were presented in such a way at various times by various people for the wrong reasons, and they led people astray. So you could add motivation number 4 as power. Power. We could be kings and priests, sitting alongside the sun and ruling with a rod of iron. Power to control and dictate people's lives. Entire cities, entire worlds, who knows? Does this appeal? It's a truth. I'm not for a second saying that the Bible does not teach this. But how do we respond to that truth? We'll be able to interpret prophecy. We'll be able to tell the future. These are all truths, but are they our driving motivation towards wanting to be part of God's family? And while we're at it, motivation number 5, the seeking for honour. We could have the inside running on the entirety of the human race, on the rest of God's creation. We would be the first and the best. The Smith's Christmas, if you like, of Christianity by human reasoning. These are truths, but we need to be very careful how we take them in terms of motivation. That's why we come along and celebrate this fantastic feast. I'd suggest, on the one around honour, the concept of honour, I've heard people make this point about somehow it makes them special. The thought that occurs to me around that is that obviously the verse in the Bible that tells us not many wise men now are called, not many noble brethren. And I'd like to think that if God's chosen me to be there helping others, I suspect part of the reason is when people who may know have known me in this life, and then hopefully if I'm there and I'm helping them, it's got to be a tremendous reassurance for them to think, well, if he can make it, anyone can. It kind of cuts the legs out of the feeling that I'm here because I'm somehow special. That approach. But I want to ask, let's lift the tone here on this message now. Is there any one of these 5 motivations that I've mentioned, or even any combination of them, enough to bring us into the closeness with God that we need to have, that God wants us to have, to keep us coming back to services week after week, to the feast year after year? I don't believe that when push comes to shove, any one of these motivations on their own will cut it. And push will come to shove. Fear, guilt, knowledge, power, honour. One fatal problem with them all immediately is, of course, they all are comprised of get versus give. And we've heard Mr. Armstrong clearly expound that difference in life, that fundamental difference, the way of get versus the way of give. We want to get saved. We don't want to be lost. We want to live forever. Who wouldn't want to get eternity? We want to get a robe and a crown and be a king and a priest and get our hands on the power and control that comes with that throne. We want to get important, get the honour, the prestige of being seen as one of the elect. If we take these truths and apply them the wrong way and look at our motivation and we see there's any trace of get in there, then we need to be cautious. By looking back, I worked my way through all of these motivations, and even during that period when I believe my motivation was truly to help others avoid what I understood to be eternal death, immediately someone passed from this life, there seemed a huge and obvious lacking in my motivation in my life. Which brings me to motivation number 6. And let's turn to the scriptures. Deuteronomy 6 verse 5, please. Let's get right back to basics. What is the motivation that we need to have? Deuteronomy 6 verse 5. A verse that I'm sure many of us can recite by heart anyway. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. Now again, I'd always known this verse, this commandment. I'd always seriously tried to do through long periods of my life. But in moments of lucid honesty, I could never bring myself to say that I actually loved my God. I could say that I feared him. I could say that I respected him. I was in awe of him. I found his creation a thing of tremendous scope and beauty, his plan an astonishing undertaking. But never could I have ever said that I actually loved God. And this was a scary admission to myself in the dark of the night, for I've always known, again, how central this was to any kind of lasting and true relationship with the Creator. But then, and finally, about 12 years ago now, after a series of pretty significant disasters in my life in 1 year, I began to take a closer look at my life and God's hand in it. And I looked at the blessings I had received throughout my life. I looked at where things had gone badly or off the rails and why. I looked at what, and this is the core of it, I looked at what God has done, what he is doing, and what he promises to do for me and for all of us. And I realised, believe it or not, for those who've probably known this their whole lives, but it was a huge shock to me. God actually wants me to win. He actually wants us to be there. And I began to think, you know what, this guy must actually like me. In fact, he may actually love me. And then with perfect timing, on top of all of this, I experienced love from an entirely new and unexpected source. Unlooked for, totally by surprise, I discovered a condition that I would have denied as being part of any kind of healthy relationship in all of my previous life. And that was my happiness became dependent on the happiness of another. I found the true, deep, lasting and unconditional happiness came when I was making the one that I loved happy. And the realisation occurred that if this works so well on a physical level, why wouldn't it work on a spiritual level? There is, of course, a lot more to it than that. This was an understanding that I'd never come to before. And for those of you, most of you who don't know me, I got married just over 6 years ago now, to the most marvellous example of Christian feminine grace, beauty and character that currently walks in my But seriously, I found a love that never ends and its gentle desire to please. And every morning when I stumbled half asleep downstairs, I'd find my beloved already up and waiting for me with open arms. I'd be sent off to work with a smile that would launch 1,000 ships, and be greeted home, if she wasn't out working herself or studying, with a hug that would keep me at home permanently and only pay a little bit. A love that seeks to give, and I am helpless but to want to return that love. And the link then became obvious. I know, we know, Fiona and I know, only too well where this love has come from. Not from us. It's come from the very creator of love. And we are both so incredibly appreciative then and now But what can we do to want to love in return? And we want to. I found that, put simply, there's no greater motivation than to make another happy. But again, let's not take my word for any of this. Let's go back to these 5 motivations I talked about and turn to the scriptures. 1 John 4 verse 18. Let's have a look at fear as an overriding, driving motivation. 1 John 4 verse 18. Let's see what John has to say here. 1 John 4:18. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear, because fear involves torment. But he who fears has not been made perfect in love. So fear alone will not cut it. It's a tiring way to live life. Who wants to live a life consumed with torment? God doesn't expect that of us as our single driving motivating force. What about guilt? Let's have a look at Proverbs 21 verse 8, please. Proverbs 21 verse 8. Proverbs 21 verse 8 tells us the way of a guilty man is perverse, but as for the pure, his work is right. Guilt won't do it. It's a hopelessly inward-looking and soul-destroying state. Deeply debilitating, it demotivates. It's no way to live a life. What about knowledge, the academic exercise? Let's have a look at Daniel 12 verse 4. See what the scripture says about the seeking after of knowledge. Daniel 12 verse 4 tells us, "But you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase." We see the rate of knowledge and the increase of knowledge in the world around us now, and we've already heard an earlier message about where has that got us. We've now come to rely wholly and solely on this constant flow of new supposed knowledge. History, by the way, should not be an option at school. Ignore history and be prepared to repeat it. If only our current political leaders were looking at the end result of this current path of debauchery that we're following and the effect that that's had on previous civilizations. Knowledge alone, the seeking after knowledge, will not cut it. What about power? Let's have a look at Zechariah. Zechariah 4 verse 6, please. Zechariah 4 verse 6. Again, a very well-known scripture. "So he answered and said to me, This is the word of the Lord to Zerubbabel, not by might, nor by power, but by my spirit, says the Lord of hosts." Power alone, the seeking for power, is not enough. What about honour? About the drive to feel like we need to be honoured. Let's have a look at Proverbs again. Proverbs 15 verse 33, please. Proverbs 15:33 tells us, "The fear of the Lord is the instruction of wisdom," we touched on that, "and before honour is humility." Forget about striving directly for honour. One of the failings in that is because if that's your desire, you think, well, hang on, I can try and grab honour in this life. I don't need to wait till the next if that's what I'm seeking for satisfaction. There's an interesting little statement too that I heard many years ago. Honour cannot be gotten. It can only be given. I thought that was a very good point. You cannot get honour. It can only be given. So if we've ruled out those 5 motivations again, which we have, I believe, as sole primary motivations, what does that leave us? It leaves us, of course, with love. And with that desire, the desire to please the one we love. If you have love for someone, you need to demonstrate that love. You cannot help but want to please and return. But again, Contrary to the wisdom of Lennon and McCartney, the Beatles, I am not trying to tell you that love is all that we need. Let's not make that mistake. Love alone is not the answer. But I do believe that we should be able to look within ourselves and state, the reason I'm here today is because God wants me to be, and I need to seek to please the God I love. I know my God well enough to know that this is where He wants me to be. Being here is what would make Him happiest because He loves me, and He knows that this life is the best place for me to be. Now John, who wrote so much on love, the disciple who Jesus Himself loved, spells it out in pure simplicity. Let's go back to 1 John 4 and finish those two verses we turned to before. 1 John 4 and verse 19 this time. Please. 1 John 4, verse 19. Tells us, we love Him because He first loved us. And there's a reciprocation thing there, but there's more again to that. And Mr. Packer alluded to this in his sermonette. We love God now because we know how to. He demonstrated how to do that through the life of Jesus on this earth. We love Him because He first loved us. We want to repay that. But we also now we know how. We've seen the example. So let's turn to our final scripture, if you would please. 1 Corinthians 13, verse 2. Let's have a look at a final word along these lines. 1 Corinthians 13, verse 2. The writings of Paul. Paul says here, 1 Corinthians 13, verse 2. And though I have the gift of prophecy, understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith, so that I could remove mountains, but if I do not have love, I am nothing. Again, we need the other. We need to have the love. So why are we here? Let's examine ourselves and make sure that the principal or primary or sole reason we're here is not any one of those first five that we went through earlier. Fear, guilt, knowledge, power, honour. It should be because we have such a love of our God that we seek to please Him in every single thing that we do. We don't want to disappoint the one we love. This is what should be bringing us along here to the feast year after year. What should be and what we will need to have to stand the tests that are before us. Love alone may not be enough. It's not enough on its own. We need faith, we need strength, we need endurance, we need obedience, we need all the things that Paul spoke of. But I believe that even if we have all of these, as Paul says, it is that genuine love for God, not just the love of God, which is that phrase, but a genuine love for and an unavoidable desire to please God that will not only bring us back here year after year as a follower of Jesus, it will make our whole life day by day a joyful, happy experience that God wants it to be.